If you have a microwave kiln or you've been thinking about getting one, let me show you a fun new earring style that you can make. If you're not familiar with microwave kilns, they are exactly what they sound like. They're simple little kilns that go into your microwave, and this inside portion of the lid heats up and fuses the glass. This smaller portion of the base is your working area, and the only other thing you need to work with your microwave kiln is you need fusing paper to protect the kiln from the glass. So you'll always set your glass on top of the fusing paper. Now these kilns come in a variety of prices all across the internet. You can find them with kits, and some of them come with glass and a few tools. Some of them are just the kiln and maybe a little bit of kiln paper, but I have a couple of different kilns and they're exactly the same, other than one of them takes a little bit longer to heat up than the other one, but they are basically just these simple pieces that you use to fuse the glass. Today's project is going to be a little more complicated than some of my other fused glass projects. So if you are really new to fusing glass in your microwave, you might want to jump to some of these additional resources that I will link in the description box. So as far as the tools and materials go, you need your microwave kiln, and if it doesn't come with heat-resistant gloves, you definitely need heat-resistant gloves when you're handling the hot kiln. You need your glass, and I like to use recycled glass, so this is just a part of a blue bottle. You want some working gloves to protect your hands while you're cutting the glass. I like to use this tray to cut the glass in just because it catches the shards, and you also want to protect your eyes with glasses or safety glasses. And this is the cutting tool that I use. They're just wheeled tile cutters, and they're not terribly precise, at least when I'm using them, but they work really well for cutting small pieces of glass. You need fusing paper, and it comes in all different shapes and sizes, but you do just need a small portion to protect your kiln, as I mentioned before. And to make this project, we're going to be using a little bit of E6000 glue, a couple of earring hooks and jump rings, some 20 gauge silver wire. You need some round tipped jewelry pliers and 2 pairs of needle nose pliers. For this project, I'm going to be fusing small little dots to start with, and to make the dots, you just need very small little square or triangular shaped pieces of glass. So you can use up old scraps of glass or misfires if you have a project that you didn't like. And as far as the cutting goes, you don't need a lot of skill to cut the glass. You just need very small pieces of glass. So as I mentioned, you do want to protect your eyes and your hands for this step. And I'm just going to try to cut small square pieces. So I just break my glass pieces down to fairly small pieces, and then I use my wheeled cutters to cut nice small pieces of square shaped glass. These are about 1/8 of an inch by 1/8 of an inch. If you decide you want your dots to be a little bit bigger, you can cut larger pieces of glass. But basically what you're trying to get to is a piece of glass that will stand up in the kiln and fuse down into a nice round domed shape. So once you have enough square pieces or triangular shaped pieces, you're ready to start your first round of fusing. And as I mentioned, this is a little more complex project than I normally do for my glass fusing. So this has a 3-step fusing process. So I'm going to take my kiln, and I have a little piece of kiln paper ready to go. And what I want to do is just choose glass pieces that are fairly similar in size. For this first step, it's not critical. And then I'm just going to stand them up with a little bit of space between them on the kiln paper. If you want to, you can use these reverse grip type of tweezers to help you place the glass, and sometimes that makes it easier because it is a little bit like a game of Jenga. So once you have all of your pieces placed on the kiln base, you're ready to start the fusing process. And I generally put the base in, make sure that none of my pieces have shifted, and then I'll go ahead and put the top on the kiln. Now this is where you just need to know your kiln. For example, one of my kilns takes about 4 minutes just to heat up in the first place. And then generally speaking, I will give that kiln 30 seconds to 15 seconds bursts after that. And you just want to keep checking the kiln to see how the fusing process is going. And this is just a little bit of a learning curve. You want to keep notes about how long things are taking, how long your kiln takes to heat up in your microwave, and you'll just start to learn some of the starting points for your kiln. For the dots, you don't really have to worry too much about overdoing it, but you do want to just make sure that you heat up the kiln and then continue heating the glass until you achieve a nice yellow glow throughout the pieces of glass, and you can see that they have a nice domed shape to them. And when you've completed the fusing process, you want to remove the kiln from the microwave, set it on a heat-resistant surface, and let your microwave kiln cool down for 45 minutes to an hour. So here are the pieces after the kiln has cooled down, and you can see that they are some nice little rounded shapes. They are different sizes, so you are going to want to make plenty of these dots in order to have enough to finish your earrings. And the other thing is that while they don't really stick too much to the fusing paper, you will notice maybe that there is a little bit of paper sticking to the back of the dots. So you will want to rinse the paper off the back before this next step. So you can see I have a lot of dots fused here, and for this next step I'm going to switch to my yellow color, and I'm going to start making the flower shape. So I need 5 little dots for each flower shape. So I'm going to need 10 total, and I want them to be pretty close to the same size. They don't have to be exact, but I do want them to be fairly close in size. And I'm just going to set them together in sort of a circular shape. The one thing about this step is that you want to be sure that you have all of the edges closed off so you don't end up with any gaps once you do the fusing process. So you just want to make sure that all of your dots are touching each other before you put them in the kiln. And the other thing is that for this step, we want to just kind of loosely tack the pieces together. And that, again, just takes really knowing your microwave kiln so that you know when to stop the heating process. And it may take a little bit of practice to get to the right amount of fusing. So there is a little bit of trial and error with this step. So what you're looking for in the kiln when the glass is fusing is just a little bit of adhesion between the dots. It's a little hard to explain, but you definitely want the dots to start combining together, but you definitely don't want them to start losing their domed shape. So here is an example of some that I took way too far. You can see that they've kind of almost merged together. The hole is almost gone. There's just a tiny little hole in there. And so that's an example of taking the fusing too far. These yellow pieces are just about perfect. You can see that they are holding together, but you can still see the little domed shapes, and you can see that on the back the pieces have fuse together as well. These next two pieces are acceptable amounts of fusing for this middle step, because you can see that the pieces are holding together. Now, if I tried to, I'm sure I could very easily snap these apart. But this is a good amount of fusing for step number 2, because we are going to do one more additional fusing step. And this is a similar example, but you'll notice that 2 of the pieces did not fuse together at all. This is probably still an acceptable amount of fusing, because again, we are going to be putting them back in the kiln and fusing these an additional time. So assuming that you have a nice couple of flower shapes that are soft tacked together, you're ready for the final fusing step. And for this step, we're just going to add the little centerpiece. So I'm going to go back to my stash of little fused dots, and I'm going to try to find a couple of blue dots for the centers of my flowers. And I just want to place them right on top of my existing shape. And you do want to try to keep the domed portion up. You don't want them to go in sideways, just because for this fusing step, again, you want to be very careful not to over fuse the pieces. And in general, it's always a little better to under fuse than to over fuse, because if you need to, you can put them back in the kiln and fuse them again. So this is ready to go back in the microwave kiln. And again, you want to keep a very close eye on it to make sure that the pieces are holding their shape, but that they are also kind of connecting and attaching to each other. So here is an example of some finished flowers. You can see that they are still holding their shape, and you can see all of the dots, but there's also a nice bond between all of the pieces. So these are fused almost perfectly, I would say. Now, the one good thing is that we are going to be using E6000 glue. So if you have 1 or 2 spots that have a very weak bond, you can use a little bit of glue on the back to help secure the pieces together if you need to. So you can make your earrings with just 1 set of flowers. I'm going to be making mine in a double flower with a sort of more of a dangle and a drop shape to them. And we're ready to go ahead and start assembling the wire pieces to attach to our flowers. These are the 3 jewelry bale shapes that we're going to be making. So this is the top bale with a coil and a loop at the top. The center bale that is made up of a coil and a little hook closure at the bottom. And the bottom bale that is a flat coil and then a flat loop on the top. To make this top bale, I need a piece of wire that's 2.5 inches long. So I'm just going to measure that out. And then you can see there's sort of a natural curve to the wire. I'm going to go ahead and bend against that curve about 1 inch down. And I'm going to bend it to about 90 degrees. So then I'm going to take the long piece of wire and I'm going to coil that into a flat coil. So I want to use the very tip of my round-tipped jewelry pliers to make a center coil. And then I can switch to the flat portion of my jewelry pliers. And continue rolling the coil until I get to the bend in my wire. So I have a piece that looks like this. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to coil the shorter end. I'm going to start in the middle of my barrel of my pliers, and I'm going to coil it side by side. So I'm just going to let it coil around and go to the side of the coil so that I have a coil, and then I just want to twist it so that it's going opposite of the flat coil. So I have my loop coil and my flat coil. To make the center jewelry bail, I need a 2-inch piece of wire. And again, I'm going to bend it, but I'm only going to bend about 3/8 or 1/4 of an inch. Again, to about 90 degrees. And then I'm going to make another flat coil, starting with the tip of my jewelry pliers and switching to the flat portion and coiling up the coil to the bend in the wire again. So my piece looks something like this. And then I just want to take this short end and I'm going to coil it up a little bit toward the coil itself, but I don't want to close that off. I'm just going to make it into sort of a hook shape right now. So I've got my hook and my coil. And for this last piece, you can either use a long piece of wire or you can just start with the wire, coil it up and trim it when you're ready. So I'm just going to start with my full piece of wire here, and I'm going to make a flat coil again, starting at the smallest end of my pliers. And I'm just going to make this coil about the same size as the other two. And then I want to take the wire and bend it up to 90 degrees so it's kind of perpendicular to my coil. And I'm going to grab the wire in the center of my barrel of my jewelry pliers, and I'm just going to pull this wire all the way back behind the coil. So you can see it makes a little bit of a loop. And then I just want to switch the jewelry pliers. So I'm using the other barrel, and I'm going to pull the wire back out. And then I want to just finish the coil so that this goes down and I can trim it at the bottom. So I'm going to actually tighten up my loop here a little bit. And then using the flat portion of my jewelry pliers again, I'm going to coil the wire down to the bottom. And then I'll just use my cutting tool to trim that piece of wire off. And if you want to, you can try to tighten it up a little bit. So that you have a flat shaped coil with a loop at the top. I'm ready to assemble the earrings now, so I'm going to start at the bottom. And I've decided that I'm going to put the light blue on the bottom. So I'm going to just flip my glass pieces over and using a little E6000 glue on my top petal here. And I just want to make sure that my loop is extended above the glass piece. So I'll set this piece aside. And now I'm going to switch to my top jewelry bail, and I'm just going to do the same process. I'm going to glue the center a little bit and hook that top jewelry bail to the top petal. And if you need to, you can add a little bit more glue. And I'm going to place my center jewelry bale in the center of the flower and making the hook go toward the front. And then I'll allow that to dry. And once the glue has cured, you can go ahead and hook the pieces together with the round tip jewelry pliers and use the needle nose pliers to add your jump rings and earring hooks. Be sure to check all the additional resources in the description box for more tips and ideas for fusing glass in a microwave kiln. There's also a link to sign up to receive the Upcycle Design Lab newsletter. Hit the like button to help promote this video, and if you haven't already, I'd love to have you click the subscribe button to join my YouTube community. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you soon back here in the lab for my next experiment.